guys. Welcome to our virtual Jack show. We're doing the best we can. Oh, we got glasses and a thermos here. I'm going to move these out of the way so you can see our Jacks. There we go. After I read our story, I'm going to pan around so you can see all of the electric Jacks that we have this year. It's not like in past years where we have our live jack-o'-lanterns in here, but we're doing the best we can this year, and I wanted to bring it to you somehow, even virtually. So today I'm reading a book, or a couple stories, by one of your favorite authors, R.L. Stine. You guys know R.L. Stine from Goosebumps and Fear Street. All right, so this is just a collection of his favorite scary stories. So I'm going to read the first one, two little short stories. The first one is called The Elevator, and it's written by William Slater. And there it is. There's no picture, so it's just me reading. But here we go. Following the stories, you'll be able to see all the Jacks and kind of feel like you're here. Here we go. The Elevator. It was an old building with an old elevator, a very small elevator, with a maximum capacity of 3 people. Martin, a thin 12-year-old, felt nervous in it from the first day he and his father moved into the apartment. Of course, he was always uncomfortable in elevators, afraid they would fall. But there was something especially unpleasant about this one. Perhaps its atmosphere was due to the light from the single fluorescent ceiling strip. It was bleak and dim, and the walls were dirty and brown. Or maybe the problem was the door, which never stayed open quite long enough and slammed shut with this big clanging finality. Perhaps it was the way the mechanism shuddered, kind of exhausted each time it left a floor, as though it might never reach the next one. Or maybe it was just the dimensions of the contraption that bothered him. It was so small. It felt uncomfortably crowded, even when there was only one other person in it. Coming home from school the day after they moved in, Martin tried the stairs, but they were almost as bad. No windows, full of shadows, dark landings where the light bulbs had burned out, and his footsteps echoed behind him like slaps on the cement, maybe like another person climbing and getting closer. By the time he reached the 7th floor, which seemed to take forever, he was winded and gasping. Excuse me. His father, who worked at home, wanted to know why he was so out of breath. "Well, why didn't you take the elevator?" he asked. After Martin explained about the stairs. "Not only are you skinny and weak and bad at sports," his expression said, "but you're a coward," Martin thought he was implying. So after that, Martin forced himself to take the elevator. He would just have to get used to it, he told himself. Just the same way he got used to being bullied at school, and always the one who got picked last when they chose teams. So the elevator was an undeniable fact of his life. Well, he didn't get used to it. He remained tense in the trembling little box, his eyes fixed on the numbers over the door that blinked on and off, as if any moment they might simply give up. It's okay. The kids are used to that. It's okay. Can you hear that, guys? They love it. It should stop in a minute. I should have turned my phone off. Okay, we're done. All right. Well, he didn't get used to it. He remained tense in the trembling little box, his eyes fixed on the number over the door that blinked on and off so haltingly, as if at any moment they might simply give up. Sometimes he forced himself to look away from them, to the emergency stop button or the red alarm button. And what would happen if he pushed one of them? Would a bell ring? Would the elevator just stop right there between floors? And if it did, how would he get out? Well, that was what he hated about being alone on the thing, the fear of being trapped in there. But it wasn't much better when there were other passengers, because he felt too close to the other riders. And he was always very conscious of the effort people made not to look at each other, just staring at nothing. Being short in this situation was an advantage, since his face was below the eye level of the other adults. And after a brief glance, they all just ignored him. Until the morning the elevator stopped at the 14th floor. And the big lady got on. She wore a threadbare green coat that kind of ballooned around her ankles bulging out above really dirty sneakers. She kind of waddled into the elevator. Martin was sure he felt it sink a little under her weight. She was pretty big. She filled the cubicle, and her coat brushed up against him. He had to squeeze into the corner to make room for her. Certainly there was no room for another passenger. And then the door slammed quickly behind her. And then, unlike everyone else, she didn't stand facing the door. She stood with her back to the door, staring directly at Martin. For a moment he met her gaze. Her features seemed very small, kind of squashed together by her cheeks, and she seemed like she had no chin, just like a big swollen neck, barely contained by the collar of her coat, and her red hair was really thin and pinned back with a barrette, and her blue eyes were very tiny and sharp and penetrating and looking right into Martin's face. Abruptly, he looked away from her to the numbers over the door, and she didn't turn around. Was she still looking at him? So his eyes kind of slipped back to hers, but then looked away quickly. Yes, she was still watching him. He wanted to close his eyes, turn around, and stare into the corner, but how could he? The elevator creaked. Down to 12. Down to 11. Martin looked at his watch, looking at the numbers again. They weren't even down to 9 yet. And then, against his will, he looked back at her face. She was still watching him. Her nose tilted up, and there was this large space between her nostrils and her upper lip, and it kind of actually made her look a little bit like a pig. He looked away again, clenching his teeth, fighting the impulse to squeeze his eyes again. She has to be crazy. I mean, why else would she just stare at him this way? But then, if she's crazy, what is she going to do next? Well, she did nothing. She just watched him, breathing, until the elevator reached the first floor at last. Martin would have rushed past her to get out, but there was no room. He could only wait as she turned, reluctantly it seemed to him, and then moved slowly out into the lobby. Then he ran, and he didn't care what she thought. He ran past her, outside into the fresh air. He ran all the way to school. He never felt such relief in his life. And then he thought about her all day. Did she live in that building? He'd never seen her before. The building's not very big. There's only 4 apartments on each floor. It seemed likely that she didn't live there. Maybe she was just visiting. But if she was just visiting, why was she leaving the building at 7:30 in the morning? People didn't make visiting at that time of day. Did she live in the building then? I mean, if so, well, that must be a certainty. Then sometime he would end up riding with her in the elevator again. So he was really apprehensive as he approached the building after school. And he thought about taking the stairs. But that was ridiculous. I mean, why should he be afraid of an old lady, right? If he was afraid of her, and if he let that control him, well, then he was worse than all the names that they called him at school. So he pressed the button. He stepped onto an empty elevator. He stared at the lights, urging the elevator on, and then it stopped at 3. At least it's not 14, he told himself. The person she was visiting lives on 14. So he watched the door slide open, and there was the green coat, and the piggy face, and the blue eyes, already staring at him as if she knew he would be right there. It wasn't possible. No, this is a nightmare. But there she was, real. Going up, he said in a squeaky voice. She nodded and stepped on, and the door slammed shut, and he watched her hand move toward the buttons, and she pressed not 14, but 18, the top floor, 1 floor above his own. The elevator trembled and began to climb, and the lady was watching him. He knew she had gotten on at 14 this morning, so why was she on 3, going up to 18 now? The only floors he ever went to were 17 and 1. What's she doing? Was she waiting for him? Was she riding with him on purpose? This is crazy. Maybe she had lots of friends in the building, or maybe she's a cleaning lady who worked in different apartments. Yeah, that has to be it. He felt her eyes on him as he stared at the numbers blinking on and off, and it seemed slower than usual. Maybe the elevator was having trouble. Maybe it's supposed to carry less people. Maybe it's just old. And what if it got stuck between floors? Or what if it fell? They're on 5 now. And it occurred to him to maybe press 7 to get off there and then just walk the rest of the way. And he would have done it if he could have reached the buttons. But there was no room to get around her without squeezing up against her. And he couldn't bear the thought of that. So he concentrated on just being home soon, in his room, just in another minute or so. He could stand anything for just a minute or so, even this crazy lady watching him. Unless the elevator got stuck. Then what would he do? He tried to push the thought away, but it just kept coming back. So he looked at her. She was still staring at him. No expression on her squashed little face. When the elevator stopped on his floor, she barely moved out of the way, and he had to inch past her. That terrible scratchy coat, and he was terrified the door would close before he made it out. She turned and watched him as the door slammed shut, and he thought, oh no, now she knows I live on 17. Did you ever notice a strange lady in the elevator, he asked his father that evening. Can't say as I have, he said. He knew he was probably making a mistake, but he had to tell somebody. Well, she was on the elevator with me twice today, and the funny thing is, she just kept staring at me. She never stopped looking at me. Do you know anybody who maybe has like a weird cleaning lady or something in the building? What are you so worked up about now, his father said. He was trying to watch TV. I'm not worked up. It's just funny the way she just kept staring at me. You know, people never look at each other in the elevator. Well, she kept looking at me. What am I going to do with you, Martin, his father said. Honestly, now you're afraid of some poor old lady. I'm not afraid. Yes, you're afraid, said his father. When are you going to grow up? You need to act like a man. Are you going to be timid all your life? He managed not to cry until he got to his room, but his father probably knew he was crying anyway. In the morning, when the elevator door opened, guess who was waiting for him? The big lady. She was expecting him now. She knew he lived on 17, and he stood there, frozen, unable to move, and then he backed away. And as he did so, her expression changed, and she smiled at him as the door slammed shut. He ran for the stairs. Luckily, the unlit flight on which he fell was between 16 and 15. He had to drag himself up only 1.5 flights. A terrible pain was in his leg. His father stayed quiet on the way to the hospital. He was disappointed and annoyed at him for being such a coward and a fool. It was just a simple fracture he suffered when he fell in the stairwell. He didn't need a wheelchair, just some crutches. But he was condemned to the elevator now. Why was it that big lady had smiled at him? Had she known that this would happen? At least his father was with him on the elevator on the way back from the hospital. There was no room for the lady to get on, and even if she did, his father would see her. He would realize how odd she was, and then maybe he would understand finally. Oh, sorry. It gets really loud. Oh, good. It ended. Okay. He could stay in the apartment for a few days. The doctor said that... Okay. We're done. Okay. Sorry for the interruption, but I'm not going to start over now. Once they got home, he could stay in the apartment for a few days. The doctor said he should use his leg as little as possible, maybe a whole week without going on the elevator. Riding up with his father, leaning on his crutches, he looked around the little cubicle and he felt a little bit triumphant. He had beaten the elevator. He had beaten the big lady for the time being. And the end of the week was still pretty far away. Oh, I almost forgot, his father said, and he reached out and pressed the number 9 button. Wait, what are you doing? You're not getting off, are you? He asked him, trying not to sound panicked. Well, I promised Terry Eldman I'd drop in on her, his father said. Oh, let me go with you. I want to visit too, Martin pleaded, and he was struggling to get forward on his crutches. But the door was already closing. Afraid to be on the elevator alone, his father said. Come on, grow up, Martin. And the door slammed shut. Well, Martin hobbled over to the buttons, and he pressed 9, but it didn't do any good. The elevator went up to the 10th floor and stopped where the big lady was waiting for him. She moved in quickly. He was too slow and too unsteady on his crutches to get past her in time, and the door sealed them in, and the elevator started going up. Why, hello, Martin, she said. And then she laughed wickedly, and that's when she pushed the stop button. Ha 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 ha! The end. All right, and I have to read you this one because this one is actually my favorite. It's called Joe is Not a Monster. It's by R.L. Stine himself. Joe is not a monster. Believe me, I know Joe better than anybody. Joe's a sweet guy. Pussycat. He wouldn't hurt a flea. So how did the nasty rumors get started? I really don't know. Well, someone at Joe's school must have started them. Someone at Joe's school whispered to someone else that Joe was a monster, and then the rumor spread and spread. And now the whole school is against Joe. Kids are frightened of him. Kids laugh and point at him behind his back. The braver kids will shout, "Hey, monster," when Joe walks past, and then they laugh and hoot when they see Joe turning red. Someone even wrote "monster" on Joe's locker, and someone tucked a wind-up toy monster in his backpack. Well, because of the ugly rumors, well, no one will hang out with Joe, so he eats by himself in a corner of the lunchroom. And no one chooses him for after-school soccer games, so he just has to stand and watch the games all alone on the side of the field. And no one will dance with him at the school dances. No one even talks to him in the halls or in class. And yesterday, a big kid from the upper school punched Joe really hard in the chest and said, "Go away from here, monster." And Joe, he just cried all the way home. Let me tell you something about Joe. He was very hurt by all of these rumors because Joe has feelings just like everybody else. Joe wants to have friends. And he really wants people to like him. Joe is a nice guy. He's kind and generous, and he has a great sense of humor. He can be a good friend. Joe didn't ask me to speak for him, but I'm speaking out anyway because I want to set things straight once and for all. Joe is not a monster. He's not a monster. Not a monster. How do I know so much about Joe? Well, that question is easy to answer because no one is as close to Joe as I am. No one knows Joe better than I do because I'm Joe's second head. Da-da-da-da. All right, we got that book in here if you guys want to check it out sometime. All right, enjoy the Jack Show. That first story took a little longer, but hopefully you guys enjoyed it. The elevator. All right, guys, I'll see you later. Bye for now. All right, guys, welcome to our Jack Show. You just heard a wonderful story. Now we get to see all of the Jacks. And they miss you. We're going to do the best we can so you can see them here. Look at all the wonderful Jacks here in the library. I like these guys. This one's a new guy this year. And there's our other ones up here. Happy faces. And I like this guy too. He's a new one too. His light's not working very well, so I put an extra candle next to him. And this picture, I love the picture. Look at all the jack-o'-lanterns in the picture. And the little cat. Hello. Oh, I see a ghost in the window. And this big piece of fabric with all my jacks on there. Well, hello there, happy fella. How are you two? I think they're friends. Like Frog and Toad. They'll be Squash and Pumpkin. And this guy lights up, actually, if you kind of tap him a little. There it is. All right. And there's a couple more. There is a light in there. It's kind of faint. Let's see if we can. There it is. All right. This is the big guy. We all remember him. And this is something new I got this year too. Look at this cute little house. It's Trick or Treat Cafe. And there's a couple little jack-o'-lanterns right there. And my kitty cat jack-o'-lantern. That's my favorite one right now. There you go. That's a carved one, but it's not real. It's like a foam. And who's this hanging out by the books? Hello there. And here we go on our table full. The green one. I really like the green light. Oh. And there's the tall fella. He looks pretty happy too. I like that his eyes look like little moons. There we go. Hello. I like that face too. And here's another tall one, but he has a different face. I like his eyes look like apple slices. There we go. One of my favorites right there. It's kind of unique. He reminds me of that pumpkin in one of the books. It's called The Ugly Pumpkin, actually. I might read that to you guys. And this one is one of my favorites too. Look at him. He's great. All right, guys, I'm going to back up a little bit. One final look at all the jacks that we have this year. There we go. It's not the same without all the ones you guys do, but we're doing the best we can. I hope you enjoyed the story, and I'll see you around. Bye-bye.